It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where the fluorescent lights in the office buzzed just loud enough to grate on your nerves, but not enough for anyone to complain. I had been at my desk since 7:30 a.m., sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug that read, "World's Okayest Employee." My inbox was flooded with emails, none of them urgent, and my mind wandered between finishing the quarterly report and wondering if I'd remembered to lock my apartment door. That's when he called me into his office. My boss, Marcus Kane, wasn't exactly known for his warmth or tact. He was the type who thrived on intimidation, always dressed in tailored suits that screamed power, even though they couldn't mask his receding hairline. His voice carried through the open-plan workspace like a whip crack, sharp and cutting. "Sophia," he barked, leaning out of his glass-walled corner office. "In here. Now." I froze mid-sentence in an email draft, my stomach sinking faster than a stone dropped in water. Something about the way he said it, the clipped tone, the smug tilt of his lips as our eyes met across the room, sent a chill racing down my spine. This wasn't going to be one of those casual check-ins where he pretended to care about my progress while subtly undermining every achievement. No, this felt different. Final. As I stood up, smoothing my pencil skirt nervously, whispers rippled through the rows of cubicles around me. Heads turned ever so slightly, eyes darting toward Marcus's office like moths drawn to a flame. Everyone knew how these meetings usually ended, someone walking out red-faced, clutching their dignity by a thread, or worse, packing up their things within the hour. But today, it was me being summoned. 8 years of loyalty, late nights, weekends sacrificed, all of it suddenly hanging precariously over an abyss I hadn't seen coming. The walk to his office felt endless, each step heavier than the last. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird desperate to escape. When I finally stepped inside, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind me, Marcus didn't bother looking up right away. Instead, he shuffled papers on his desk with deliberate slowness, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then, without warning, he leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers beneath his chin, and fixed me with a look that could curdle milk. "Sophia," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "after 8 years, it's time to move on. You'll be leaving tomorrow because you're simply not worthy enough." And just like that, the floor fell out from under me. His words hit me like a freight train, each syllable slicing through whatever shred of self-worth I'd managed to cling to after years of grinding away in this soulless corporate machine. Not worthy enough. The phrase echoed in my head, louder and more damning than anything else he could have said. It wasn't just dismissal, it was humiliation packaged neatly in 3 words designed to strip me bare. My chest tightened as if an invisible hand were squeezing all the air out of my lungs. For a moment, I thought I might actually collapse. But then something strange happened. A flicker of defiance sparked deep inside me. Quiet at first, but growing stronger with every heartbeat. I straightened my spine, forcing myself to meet his cold gaze head-on. "All right," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Marcus blinked, clearly taken aback by my calm response. He must have expected tears, protests, maybe even begging, anything but this quiet resolve. His smug smile faltered for half a second before snapping back into place, but I caught it. That fleeting crack in his armor gave me strength. If he thought I'd crumble under his cruelty, he had no idea what I was capable of. What he didn't know, and what kept me rooted to the spot instead of crumbling, was that 2 months ago, I had secretly purchased the company. Every painstakingly saved dollar, every sleepless night spent poring over financial reports, every ounce of sacrifice I'd made over the past decade had led to this moment. I owned the very ground he sat on, the walls surrounding us, the empire he believed belonged solely to him. And yet, there he was, acting as though he held all the power, treating me like yesterday's trash. The irony burned hotter than any anger I felt. Here was a man who prided himself on control, on dominance, completely oblivious to the fact that his reign was already over. The knowledge buoyed me, wrapping around my wounded pride like armor. I let him revel in his false victory, watching as his smirk widened, mistaking my silence for defeat. Let him think he won. Tomorrow would tell a different story, one where the tables turned so dramatically that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the office buzzed with palpable tension, a mix of hushed whispers and stolen glances as employees filed in, sensing something was amiss. Word had spread quickly about my abrupt dismissal, fueled by Marcus's own careless gloating during yesterday's staff meeting. She wasn't cut out for leadership, he declared, leaning casually against the conference table as if delivering some profound truth. Sometimes people just can't keep up. His words hung in the air like poison, seeping into every corner of the workplace. By the time I walked through the glass doors at 8 a.m. sharp, heads turned in unison, faces painted with pity or thinly veiled relief that it hadn't been them. I ignored the stares, my heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as I made my way to the center of the office. Today wasn't about me, it was about exposing the truth. Dressed in a sleek black blazer and trousers, I carried myself with a confidence that surprised even me. Gone was the woman who had once tiptoed around Marcus's ego. In her place stood someone who knew exactly what she wanted and how to take it. At precisely 9 a.m., I called an emergency meeting, sending out a company-wide email moments before stepping into the boardroom. The space filled quickly, chairs scraping against the floor as curious employees jockeyed for seats. Marcus arrived last, strutting in like a peacock ready to assert his authority. His expression shifted when he saw me standing at the head of the table, flanked by two lawyers whose presence alone sent a ripple of unease through the room. "Sophia?" Marcus asked, his voice laced with confusion. "What is this?" I smiled, a small, tight-lipped curve that didn't reach my eyes. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my tone measured but firm. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As many of you know, yesterday marked the end of my tenure here as an employee under Marcus Kane's leadership." Murmurs erupted around the table, but I raised a hand to silence them. However, what none of you know, including Marcus, is that 2 months ago, I acquired majority ownership of this company. The room went dead silent. Even the faint hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade into nothingness. Marcus's face drained of color, his jaw slackening as he stared at me like I'd grown a second head. What are you talking about?" he stammered, his usual bravado evaporating. I slid a folder across the table toward him, its contents detailing the transaction. Legal documents, shareholder agreements, everything needed to prove my claim. "You've been operating under the assumption that you're untouchable, Marcus. That your position here is secure because you've built this company into what it is today. But let me remind you, companies aren't built by one person, they're built by teams. And unfortunately for you, your management style has done more harm than good." One of the lawyers stepped forward, opening the folder and pointing to specific clauses. "Effective immediately, Mr. Kane will be stepping down as CEO," she announced, her voice clear and authoritative. "Ms. Carter has assumed full executive control of the company." Chaos erupted. Employees exchanged shocked looks, some breaking into nervous laughter while others whispered furiously. Marcus shot to his feet, slamming his palms on the table. "This is absurd. There's no way." "Sit down, Marcus," I interrupted, my voice cutting through his protest like a blade. "Your tantrums won't change the facts. You've alienated your team, micromanaged projects into failure, and fostered a toxic work environment. This isn't personal, it's business. And frankly, the company deserves better." For the first time in years, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. He sank back into his chair, defeated, as murmurs of disbelief and cautious optimism rippled through the room. Around the table, colleagues who had once avoided eye contact with me now nodded approvingly, their expressions softening with newfound respect. It was surreal, almost cathartic, to watch the tide turn so decisively. When the initial shock subsided, I addressed the group directly. "I understand this news comes as a surprise, but I want to assure you that change is coming, not just at the top, but throughout the organization. We're going to rebuild trust, empower innovation, and create a culture where everyone feels valued. This isn't about revenge. It's about moving forward together." As I spoke, I noticed Marcus slumping lower in his seat, his arrogance replaced by shame. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of satisfaction. Justice had been served, but it wasn't over yet. The days following the dramatic boardroom showdown were unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The office transformed overnight, buzzing with a mix of exhilaration and uncertainty. Employees who had once tiptoed around Marcus now moved through the halls with renewed energy, their shoulders squared and voices carrying just a little louder. Conversations that used to revolve around avoiding his wrath now centered on possibilities, new ideas, fresh strategies, and the hope of rebuilding something meaningful. Yet, amidst the excitement, there lingered an undercurrent of tension. Change, no matter how necessary, rarely came without resistance. Marcus, predictably, refused to go quietly. Though stripped of his title, he clung to scraps of influence like a drowning man grasping at driftwood. At first, he tried to rally allies among senior management, muttering about corporate sabotage and legal loopholes in hushed tones outside my office. But his attempts fell flat. Most executives either distanced themselves entirely or outright supported my takeover. One particularly memorable encounter took place when he stormed into my office uninvited, slamming the door behind him with enough force to rattle the framed certificates on the wall. "You think this is over?" he spat, pacing like a caged animal. "Do you honestly believe they'll follow you? They're scared of me, Sophia. Always have been." I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, studying him with a detached calm that only seemed to infuriate him further. "They're not scared of you anymore, Marcus," I replied evenly. "Fear doesn't inspire loyalty. It breeds resentment. And right now, they see an opportunity to build something better. Something real." He scoffed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "You don't know what you're doing. This company will crumble without me." "Funny," I said, arching an eyebrow. "Because from where I'm sitting, it was already crumbling with you." That silenced him, for a moment at least. He left my office fuming, muttering threats under his breath, but his grip on the situation was slipping fast. Over the next week, several key players within the company approached me privately, offering their support and sharing stories of how Marcus's leadership had stifled creativity and morale. Some admitted they'd stayed silent out of fear, while others confessed they'd considered leaving altogether. Their words reinforced what I already knew. Marcus's reign had left scars far deeper than I'd imagined. Yet, for all his bluster, there were moments when I glimpsed a flicker of vulnerability in him, a shadow of the man he might have been before power warped him. During one particularly heated exchange in the break room, he snapped at a junior analyst for making a minor error on a report. The young woman burst into tears, prompting another colleague to intervene. Marcus stormed off, but not before casting a glance over his shoulder that lingered just long enough to betray regret. It was subtle, fleeting, but unmistakable. These glimpses complicated my feelings toward him. On one hand, I despised what he represented: arrogance masquerading as authority, cruelty disguised as discipline. On the other, I couldn't ignore the humanity buried beneath layers of ego and insecurity. Was he truly irredeemable, or was he a product of the very system he'd perpetuated? The question gnawed at me, tugging at the edges of my resolve. Meanwhile, the company itself faced challenges as we transitioned into a new era. Rebuilding trust wasn't easy. Old habits die hard, especially in environments steeped in fear. I held town hall meetings, encouraging open dialogue and inviting feedback from every level of the organization. Some embraced the changes enthusiastically, while others remained skeptical, waiting to see if this was merely another chapter in a cycle of broken promises. Progress was slow, uneven, but undeniable. Projects stalled under Marcus's micromanagement began gaining momentum again, and collaboration flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. Through it all, I wrestled with my own emotions. Satisfaction mingled with guilt, pride with doubt. Had I acted out of justice or vengeance? Was I truly leading with integrity, or had I simply traded one form of control for another? These questions haunted me late at night, when the adrenaline of the day faded and the weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. But even in those quiet moments, one truth remained clear. The company deserved better. And so did its people. By the end of the month, the atmosphere in the office had shifted significantly. The initial shock of Marcus's ousting had given way to cautious optimism, and employees began to embrace the promise of change. Morale improved as collaborative projects gained traction, and innovative ideas flowed freely for the first time in years. People stopped tiptoeing around decisions and started taking ownership of their work, transforming the once stifling environment into a vibrant hub of creativity. Yet, amid this progress, Marcus remained a ghost haunting the periphery, lingering in corners and occasionally appearing in meetings with a defeated slump to his shoulders. His presence was a constant reminder of unresolved tension, and I knew that true healing couldn't happen until we addressed it head-on. One afternoon, I found myself standing outside the small conference room where Marcus sat alone, staring blankly at a stack of papers. For weeks, he'd been relegated to menial tasks, his contributions marginalized by both necessity and design. Watching him now, I felt a pang of something unexpected, not pity, exactly, but recognition. Beneath the bitterness and bravado, there was still a human being struggling to reconcile who he was with who he'd become. Taking a deep breath, I knocked lightly on the doorframe before stepping inside. "Marcus," I said softly, pulling out a chair across from him. He looked up, startled, his eyes narrowing instinctively. "Can we talk?" He hesitated, then nodded curtly, folding his arms across his chest like a shield. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken grievances and missed opportunities. Finally, I broke it. "I want to start by saying something I should have said a long time ago. I'm sorry for how things ended between us, for the way I handled everything." His eyebrows shot up, skepticism etched across his face. "Sorry? You're apologizing to me? After everything?" "I'm not excusing what you did," I interjected firmly. "You hurt people, Marcus. Me included. But I also realize now that I let anger drive my actions instead of focusing on what really mattered, fixing this company and helping the people in it thrive. Revenge doesn't heal wounds. It creates new ones." For a moment, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, his defenses began to crumble. "Do you think I don't know that?" he muttered, his voice rough with emotion. "Every day, I walk through these halls and see the damage I caused. I built this place from nothing, and now," he trailed off, shaking his head bitterly. "Now I'm nothing." "That's not true," I said gently. "You may have lost your position, but you haven't lost your potential. Look, I won't pretend this is easy for either of us. But if you're willing, I'd like to offer you a chance to stay on. Not as CEO, obviously, but in a role where your experience could still make a difference. Maybe mentoring younger employees or consulting on strategy. Whatever you're comfortable with." He blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Why would you do that?" "After everything." "Because holding on to hate only weighs you down," I replied honestly. "And because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, even you. This isn't about erasing the past, it's about learning from it." Together, tears welled in his eyes, and for the first time, I saw the man behind the mask, the ambitious dreamer who had once poured his heart into building something great, only to lose himself along the way. He swallowed hard, nodding silently as he wiped his face with trembling hands. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. I don't deserve this, but thank you." As we shook hands, a sense of closure washed over me. Forgiveness wasn't about absolving him of his mistakes, it was about freeing us both from the chains of resentment. In that moment, I realized that leadership wasn't just about wielding power, it was about extending grace, fostering growth, and creating space for redemption. And perhaps, in giving Marcus a lifeline, I was also granting myself permission to move forward, to lead not with vengeance but with compassion. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the woman who once cowered under Marcus's shadow. She was timid, uncertain, and desperate to prove herself in a world that seemed determined to tear her down. But the journey, from victim to victor, from subordinate to leader, taught me lessons I never expected to learn. Power, I discovered, isn't about domination, it's about responsibility. True strength lies not in crushing your enemies, but in lifting others up, even when it's hardest to do so. And forgiveness? It's not a gift you give someone else. It's a release you grant yourself. The transformation extended far beyond me. The company, once a stifling monument to fear and control, became a beacon of collaboration and innovation. Teams that had operated in silos began working seamlessly together, fueled by trust and mutual respect. Employees who had once dreaded coming to work now greeted each other with genuine smiles, their passion reignited by the belief that their contributions mattered. Productivity soared, profits climbed, and the company's reputation flourished. Most importantly, the culture shifted from one of survival to one of thriving, a testament to the idea that organizations are only as strong as the people within them. Marcus, too, found his footing in unexpected ways. Initially hesitant, he eventually embraced the mentoring role I offered, pouring his decades of experience into nurturing the next generation of leaders. Watching him guide young analysts with patience and encouragement was surreal, a stark contrast to the tyrant he'd once been. Though our relationship remained professional rather than personal, there was an unspoken understanding between us, a shared acknowledgement of growth, resilience, and redemption. This experience reshaped my perspective on leadership in profound ways. I learned that authority isn't something you take, it's something you earn, day by day, through actions that align with your values. It's about listening more than speaking, empowering rather than controlling, and recognizing that success isn't measured by titles or accolades, but by the positive impact you leave behind. Leadership, I realized, is a service, not a privilege. If there's one message I hope others take away from my story, it's this: no matter how powerless you feel, you hold more agency than you think. Life will throw obstacles your way, people will try to diminish you, and moments will come when giving up seems easier than fighting back. But don't let fear dictate your choices. Stand firm in your worth, fight for what's right, and remember that even the smallest acts of courage can spark monumental change. Because in the end, it's not just about surviving, it's about rising.